Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm UTC President and CEO Rusty Williams, and I want to thank you for joining us today on this special edition of the UTC podcast. This one we call the C-Suite Conversations. In these special episodes, we talk to executive leaders of many of the UTC associate members so that we can get a better understanding of what's going on at their companies and across the industry. At UTC, since we bring together the utilities that provide services to our communities and the technology partners that help them with those services, we celebrate all of those companies, whether they're large or small, that have been association members for several years. One of those companies is TC Communications. And today, we're happy to have with us Steve Cragg, who is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at TC Communications. Steve, it's great to have you with me today on this episode of the C-Suite Conversations.
Well, hi, Rusty. Thanks for that excellent introduction. It's a great opportunity to talk to the UTC membership. We've been members of UTC now for many years. We find it particularly useful both for what we provide, but also learning about what's going on in the industry. So great to have this opportunity.
All right, great. And that's really what we want to talk about today, to see what's going on not only at TC Communications, but around the industry. So let's talk about you for right quick. One of the things I do when I bring people on all the podcasts we do, I let the guest tell about themselves. So why don't you give us just a little bit of history about yourself, kind of what you've done and what got you to where you are today.
Well, a bit of a global story, really. As you can probably work out from the accent, I'm actually a New Zealander. Actually, I guess, started in utilities by the fact that when I was doing my engineering degree, I had a scholarship for what was then the single utility in New Zealand.
Hmm.
The plan was to work in the utility industry, and unfortunately, a few months before I graduated, the New Zealand government decided to privatise it, and all the jobs dried up. So I ended up working in the two-way radio industry for a New Zealand company called Telecommunications.
Oh, yeah.
Now
Who is,
they
who is also a UTC member, by the way.
Absolutely, yes, we had a lot to do with them. I initially worked as a design engineer, moved through to sales and management, mainly with a global focus. So I did a lot of work in mainly utilities, public safety, and transportation for Africa, India. Africa, Eskom was a big customer of
Hmm.
ours, the largest South African utility.
Right.
Bangladesh Power, of all places, which is an interesting place, Middle East, Latin America. And then 2008, I was appointed managing director for Tate for the Americas, so North and Latin America, and ended up moving to the US, based just on the west side of Houston in Katy, Texas. And there it was 2008 was a particularly interesting time because we were just coming up to the radio rebanding. So a lot of utilities, a lot really interested in our products. PG&E, Puget Sound Energy, Mid-America were some of the larger people we supply radio systems to, but also I got a lot of experience with some of the smaller co-ops, all across the country.
Hmm.
And I found that, it's interesting. You sort of end up back almost where you thought you might have started, learning about what's important to utilities. And then 2020, I joined TC Communications. They were looking to significantly expand. They were looking for somebody with experience in particularly in utilities, but also public safety and transportation. So I've been with them for just shy of 6 years now. So interesting times through COVID, but since then our business has gone from strength to strength.
Yeah, COVID seems like 100 years ago in one regard, and it was only 5 or 6 years ago that we were dealing with that, and I think that impacted a lot of us through our careers, things that happened. So you mentioned you went to TC Communications 5 or 6 years ago. Just to level set with everybody that might be listening that may not know the name TC Communications. Why don't you give us your snippet, elevator speech, whatever you want to call it, about TC Communications so everybody understands what place that you guys hold in the market?
Sure. Well, the elevator pitch is legacy interfaces over modern networks. So, what does that really mean? Well, that's things such as any legacy interface. So we're talking specifically C3794, T1, RS232, 422, etc. A lot of lease line replacement. And we do that over a variety of modern networks. So predominantly it's over IP networks. We also do a lot over T1s and dark fiber networks as well. So the common way I would put it is somebody, let's say a utility, puts in a brand new IP network. They come along and go, right, okay, we'll use this for everything. And somebody says, well, what about the Kamakuza 2000 in the corner? That doesn't have an IP interface. We go, okay, well, we won't use that. And they're going, well, if we don't use that, bad things are going to happen. Well, we'll buy a new one. Okay, we had a look at that. That's $10 million. Oh, crap. What do we do? And then we come along and we say, well, we have a dedicated interface for whatever that piece of equipment uses. We transport it over the more modern networks, mostly at the moment, IP, Ethernet. And we allow you to utilize your new network with your legacy equipment. And that gives you a great way to either migrate from old equipment to newer equipment, or just continue to use that equipment that you've got a lot of investment in, and it's not planned to be replaced maybe for 5, 10, 15, or even 20 years.
So, being the techno nerds that many of us are, this industry is attracted to the new technologies, right? The biggest, baddest, fastest, shiniest of the technologies. But that's the conundrum that utility people are in, right? Because the number one priority for the utility is to keep the lights on, keep the gas flowing, keep the water flowing. And for a lot of people, the newer technologies, it creates risk, could introduce risk into that delivery of those services. So how do we balance that? And from your perspective, now you've kind of been on the on the partner side, supplier side, but in working with utilities, I don't care if it's two-way radios or if it's IP. By the way, the IP stuff. We actually have a group within UTC that's looking at this particular issue. We call it packet transition. You call it whatever you want to call it, right? But it's that, what do we do, right? In this interim period, and I hate to use the word interim because interim may end up being 20 years, right? That we've got this equipment in there. So, I mean, how do we balance that on the utility side to be able to have the reliability we want, but still have the services that the customers end up needing?
Well, I think it's difficult. I mean, it's very easy to say, look, everything's going IP. We'll just do that. It's expensive. It's expensive. It's high risk. Um, Simply to just replace everything all at once. You obviously can't do that. It's a transition over a period of time. It introduces a whole lot more of challenges, risks, if you like, such as cybersecurity,
Hmm.
training of staff, retention of staff is a big deal. And I think what we find is while there's a desire to go from point A to point B, you have to think very carefully about the road you use to get there. And that does not mean that you're going to replace, for example, every teleprotection relay in your network instantaneously. Now, what that means is there is a point where the old is going to have to work with the new, either immediately or over a period of time. And as you say, it's not unusual for us to be working with to get a call from somebody that's been using our equipment for 15 plus years, which means they started their migration probably 20 years ago, and
Right.
they're still working on it. That doesn't mean that the network's at risk in any fashion. What that means is you have to plan from the start what your migration strategy is going to be and how you're gonna de-risk it. And that's a lot of what we spend our time doing. We also see an awful lot of time where people come to us and they have, for example, a channel bank. Well, nobody's used channel banks for years. Well, everybody's still using channel banks. They're
Absolutely.
this old technology. A lot of them aren't being made anymore. And the question is, how do we deal with this while we transition? And the answer is often, well, look, yes, we make a new channel bank that would replace all of what you've got. But maybe in the transition, what is being looked for is, the question is, I have these channel banks, I'm planning to replace them in 5 years' time, which might be 8 years' time. In the meantime, I can't buy spares.
Hmm.
That's a big risk to the organization. So often what we do there is look, replace a portion of it with a modern version, take the equipment out that you were using before, it's still working, create a spares dump of that equipment. So a lot of that sort of approach there, what that does is it gives you the length, the better time. It also means that you've got time to better train people in the incoming equipment and so on. So it really is for me a lot about not only the risk, but also the cost of ownership of it. Just that forklift can be tremendously expensive, whereas a well-planned migration can significantly reduce your cost of ownership.
Yeah. And the rip and replace is never the preferred method usually with utilities. One, it just takes a lot of effort and money, but two, it introduces risk. Being in the infrastructure business myself on the utility side, anytime you touch anything, I don't care what it is, any kind of change management exercise, whether it's firmware upgrades or you're replacing interfaces or whatever, you're introducing risk into the process. And a very quick rip and replace in the utility world is probably, as you said, 5 years, and 5 years turns into 8, turns into 10 pretty quickly. It's just for various good business reasons, but it always does. But I think what you're saying is, for even though the legacy equipment can meet the needs, the technical needs of the utilities, there are other triggers that cause us to have to make a decision and start making changes. One of them was just, you alluded to it, you didn't get explicit with it, was just the availability of components. We've had a couple of members, associate members that at UTC that make products that over the last 2 or 3 years have had to stop selling those particular products just because they couldn't get the piece parts to be able to either put them together new or to replace them. At cyber? You mentioned cyber just a second ago. So that's another one of those triggers. If something came out from a cybersecurity vulnerability or requirement, that might drive us one way or the other. You've been seeing much of that from
Oh, absolutely.
UT Communications.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting. So just to cover one of your points, yes, the parts availability is a massive concern. We spend a lot of our effort, continuing to make sure that things remain available. That's been a challenge. But with cybersecurity, yes, very much a big concern. Two real areas. I mean, obviously, as you drive towards IP connectivity for things, every element that you bring into the to your network potentially gives you a vulnerability. Now, while no single manufacturer can come along with a piece of equipment that says there is absolutely no risk in adding this to your network because it may interact with your existing equipment. What we've seen though is more and more now we're seeing organizations move towards third-party tools for scanning their network for cybersecurity. One we use a lot is a tool called Qualys by a company called Qualys. They provide a suite of equipment, a suite of software that they can a utility or any user can scan their whole network pretty much on a daily basis. What we found was really popular was we have started to scan our equipment with that same tool. We can then give what is a common industry standard report to all of our hardware and software users. And on
Hmm.
that basis, we can't say, look, there's no risk. What we can say is we've taken care of our risk. So all of our product, we scan every week or two our entire suite of product. We can actually then, if we see there's a new vulnerability that Qualys has detected that may be applicable to our equipment, we can then start immediately with our staff here. All our design engineers are here in the US, so it's relatively straightforward for us to address that. As I said, that's not a guarantee that when you introduce it to the network, it won't interact with something else, but it does de-risk it. To your question, are people interested in that? Well, we made a little video explaining how we do that. That quickly became our most watched video by, I think, a factor of 5 in 2 weeks. So, yeah, pretty important, obviously pretty timely.
Yeah. So I don't think we mentioned earlier when we were talking about your company. You're headquartered in Southern California in the LA Basin area there in Irvine. And I had the opportunity to go into your facility a year or so ago. We were in the area prepping for our annual conference last year and got to go through, meet a lot of your team and go through the facility there. And so back to tie that back to the conversation that we were just having about cybersecurity, how do you see being headquartered in the US and being able to, not only, sell the equipment or administrate it, but actually manufacture it in the U.S. Are you seeing a lot of advantage of that from, Build America, Buy America kind of an approach? And why do that in that manner as opposed to maybe offshoring some of the, the manufacturing part of what you guys do?
Well, I mean, it's important. It's becoming more important. I mean, there's been a recent drive to enforce the Buy America Act. I think
Hmm.
some companies have tried to go around that. Something we're really, he says in his New Zealand accent, was something we're really proud to be. But no, we've been designing manufacturing here in the US. I think obviously, Buy America means you have federal funds. It becomes a lot easier. That's one. I think that's pretty minor. I think most people, the frustration of when you want to talk to somebody, you do have an issue, you want to talk to somebody, you don't want to talk to somebody in some call center. You actually want to do it. Our advantage is if we've got something that's difficult enough, you want to talk to the person that designed the product, who knows it better than anybody, we can put them on the phone. I think that's a great I think that's a great thing. My experience is I've worked for, as I mentioned before, a New Zealand company. I've worked for a Chinese-owned company, and I can tell you, it's really it's really difficult compared with working with a company that's designed made in America. I think also you want to look for an organization. We have a lot of long-term employees. I think the key thing that we look for is people that know the industry, know the application, and can talk to people. And if you're going to talk to people in the US utility market, you need people with experience in the US utility market, and they don't exist overseas really. Most of them are here, and rightly so.
Yeah,
But
and we do have a quite well a few companies in the U in that are U.S. based that are UTC members, and we see that same story a lot of the value of having it onshore. And that's not everybody has to make their business decisions. I understand that, but
Uh,
there's a niche, and one of the things you just said, again, I came out of the utilities part of the business, right? Is you got to know the business, and you got to be available when we need you available to help me. If I'm the guy that's got the problem, help me figure out what's the problem so we can get things back the way they should be.
Yeah, and as you said, the other excuse me. I mean, the other thing for us is, we work the same hours, we work the same holidays.
Right, right.
Not that we're not available during holidays, but it's not that we're having some random other thing. But I think realistically for us, it's a matter of it is a matter of pride. The owner of the organization, Kai Liang, he's very much focused on building US industry, and I think from our point of view, we managed to ride out some of the supply chain issues and so on, just simply because um, we source as many parts as possible from here. We manufacture here. It impacted us a lot less. And actually, we gained a significant amount of business through that time, being able to deliver in a few weeks when other companies were offering, 6 to 8 month delivery time. So, for me, it's really good. It's sometimes interesting to look back and go, yeah, I remember. I remember what it was like when I didn't work for a US based company.
Well, I've got one other topic that I want us to talk about before we get finished here today, and that's the idea of I don't know what you want to call it. If you want to call it training, you want to call it workforce improvement, you want to call it education, whatever you want to call it. But that topic in the conversations that we've had leading up to this is we found out we do have a common interest, right, or a common goal, and
Mm.
that's to try to attract workers into this field whether you're on the supplier side or the utility side, and provide the opportunities to learn and grow their careers. Tell me just a little bit about your philosophy or TC Communications philosophy on trying to help that challenge that we've got in this industry.
Right. Well, I think, as I mentioned before, TC Communications is was founded by owner Kai Liang. He's been, with the company 35 years, and he comes from a maintenance background. So
Hmm.
he designs or he wants the products designed so they are easy to use, easy to maintain, easy to set up, and so on. And I think that's particularly important at the moment, and particularly as utilities are moving from, say, a sonnet-based environment, which a lot of them were, to an
Hmm.
IP environment. Now, they have a lot of people that are familiar with Sonnet, and now they need to learn a whole new set of skills with IP, and that can be a challenge. So, in that case, being able to provide a you know easy training to bring those people from what is a very different methodology from one where timing has to be synchronized to basically an asynchronous communication scheme and all that goes with that. So I think that's one thing, but also as utilities start looking for new staff, particularly in the IP space, it's
Hmm.
very crowded. It's a very competitive environment. There's a lot of companies there paying a lot of money for good IT professionals. And I think what we're seeing is we see some of the utility staff moving for other opportunities and it being difficult to bring people in. So for us, what we've looked at is, look, give you it really comes down to cost of ownership, I guess. Um, if you can train your people quickly, if you can train them well, then that becomes a lower cost of ownership. It also means you can bring your people that, have experience in a different technology and quickly bring them into the new technology, bridging from one to the other. For us, we look at one of the key benefits we offer is being able to interface to a wide variety of, for example, different teleprotection relays by
Mhm.
different manufacturers. So because it's one platform that can talk to all of those, rather than a defined, you buy this type of equipment, you use this type of communication, then you've got another one that has its own proprietary communication translation um, issue. What we provide is a single platform, learn it once, learn it easily, and your staff are quickly up and running. And we've worked with a number of utilities now to understand what's important to them, what the questions they are, and bring that training and to them. And what we're seeing is, as I said, lower cost of ownership of the equipment. I mean, equipment's expensive, but the real cost is in using it, maintaining it, training people. I was just recently in Louisiana at a training session for 12 staff from a large utility in the area. They've had to bring their 12 people for 2 days plus travel time plus hotels and so on. And that's expensive. Time is
Mhm.
expensive. So being able to reduce that, make it easy, and then be able to back it up with the support, I think is what I think we should be looking for there. And it goes very much, as I said, to the ethos of TC Communications, which is, if you can, we say you should be able to look at our product and see if there's a problem, and if there is, work out what it is within seconds, and then be able to get in, make a very standardized, easy to use interface, and so on. So for me, that's important. That seems to really play well with the utilities we deal with. And as we talk to new ones, we are seeing that this retention and training of staff issue is quite a large thing.
Right.
Also, you've got the issue that we're used to classroom training. If you get younger people, under 40, he says, hopefully, what you see is they learn differently. They are far more likely to want to see videos than read equipment. So we've had to adapt our training methods and that to the types of people that we're looking for. And I think that's a lesson that plays well in all utilities, which is, hey, we're doing a podcast. We're not putting out a white paper on this.
Right.
And that just says how people change in the consumption of what they learn, and we've got to move with those times.
Yeah, and again, we have that same challenge at UTC, or we're trying to help meet that challenge. The members are seeing a lot of information about what we're calling the UTC Academy, where we're doing just that on a broader scale of how can we help those organizations that are bringing new people in, but it's something that's focused for this industry and not some generic training or whatever. But I call it a trade school approach to
Yeah.
training as opposed to, a more academic setting. But it's to get people, because we would hear from utility members that, hey, half of my crew now, half maybe three people, to your point earlier, have left, retired or whatever, and I've moved two people in from the meter shop, and I've hired one guy, from the outside, and we're trying to figure out how to get them up to speed. So, we're kind of doing that as well. And to your point of, how you consume that training, that is part of the big challenge for
Well,
sure.
I think so. I think if you look at it now, I mean, something goes wrong with your washing machine. What do you do? Well, you look on YouTube, and there's some guy that has fixed it for you, and you just follow the instructions. Do you go and look for the manual? Probably not. You're probably just looking for it, and that's a challenge. I think
Yeah.
that's a challenge for utilities to access that information. I think it's a challenge for vendors to provide the information in a more readily usable form. For a company like TC, it's really important that, often it's not just new people, but people who've been through the training. They maybe then didn't get to use that training, and
Right.
then a year later they come back to it, and they need to be able to access that. So that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, we'll wrap it up there. There's a lot of topics we could talk about, but I do appreciate you taking some time today, spending time with me on the podcast here. I want to thank you for being involved with UTC and TC Communications for your involvement. And we hope that relationship continues for quite a while. But thanks for being with me today.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure, Rusty, as usual. We'll look forward to the UTC meeting and hope to see you there.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see everybody in Minneapolis. I know TC Communications will be there along with a lot of other of our associate members. Well, that will do it for this edition of the C-Suite Conversation podcast. I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast and be on the lookout for future episodes. And I look forward to seeing you down the road.